Hello, welcome back. I'm Deanna. This is my mom, Rosemary. We are going to have another conversation about some hard things today. And again, we don't have a script. We've only kind of talked about this, so we're just going to bring some things up and see what happens.
We've been living it.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about both of us had a very prominent person in our lives who was also a very damaging person in our lives. It was my father, her husband. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So I mean, I don't know if he's technically a narcissistic personality or what, I'm not sure, but things were not good for us. In my household growing up, there was a lot of yelling, a lot of authoritarianism, a lot of physical punishment, a lot of fear in the house. That was the prevailing feeling, I think, for me, especially at least, was fear. It was a terrifying place to be.
For me, just a tremendous amount of tension, pressure, stress.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's start with, I guess you guys met when you were very young at college, right? So you were what, 20 years old, maybe?
Yeah, 20.
Yeah. And he was 21 or so. I think he's a year older than you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then how long, and then you guys got married pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of relative. Yes, I knew him through that year of college, and we began dating. And let's see, and then we went back to school. And through that summer, back to school, and then the following year got married.
Okay. Yeah.
So not a matter of months, but yeah, it was still relatively
still pretty quick. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm even remembering right. There's a lot of things I choose not to remember, but I'm trying to learn from them. So yeah.
Fair. That's, yeah. And we don't have to go too much into the details, but it starts like abusive relationships always do, where things are good. And you love that person and you think that person loves you, and it sneaks up on you. You never go into it thinking that's what it's going to be, right? Like, you always hope for the best. You're always thinking like, they'll get better. We'll figure this out.
Right.
This'll
we'll figure this out. But kind of a resignation for me that, well, yeah, I'm going to feel uneasy about this, but that's how it's supposed to be. Like, that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't pay attention to that enough, just this idea of like this discomfort that I had in that relationship from early on, which was really more infatuation than love. But I don't know that I chose to recognize that. And in a way, I had a relationship that was a little bit more like a loving relationship, even in the courtship, a lot more like a loving relationship. But I still chose something that felt, it is weird, but I guess I almost felt like that was just a dream. I have to choose somebody. I need to choose somebody who will hurt me. I don't know, but I think somewhere there was that weird idea that the other was just some kind of fantasy that couldn't be real. This one doesn't feel very comfortable and it's going to be hard, therefore it must be right.
Yeah.
That's strange, right?
Yeah. I mean, and we can, there's layers we can go into.
There's all kinds,
There's a lot of depth.
But we're talking about the family dynamics and and your story about.
Well, and we can kind of come back around to that, because it's growing up with a man like that in your house predisposes you to date other men like that. But your dad wasn't like that, and although there were different kinds of issues that came up, but
Yeah.
really can have such a strong impact. But yeah, we'll come back to that.
I guess that maybe a main point is the idea of disconnect from myself that I started out the relationship with, a disconnect from myself. And that's not a good place to start a relationship and start a family. Try to be a mom.
Yeah. And I mean, you're so young. You guys were so young.
That's true. We didn't think we were, but we sure were.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long into the relationship, like when did you first think that maybe that his behavior was like wrong, that maybe there was something like seriously off in your relationship?
Well, I feel like we started that way.
Okay. So yeah, so it always kind of fell off. So then it just...
Yeah, actually, when you say, and I don't know, I want people to be able to relate to this. And if they feel like they were so in love with that person and then it turned bad, I guess I could use my second marriage as an example of that, feeling so in love and then it turned really bad. With your dad, it felt off from the very beginning. And I somehow, at some weird level, was like, this is the person that's really going to mess me up. That's the one I have to marry. This is the person I'm going to be most messed up with.
Wow.
Like the dysfunction in both of us drew us together, probably. And so it wasn't like it was this, I'm so in love with you kind of romance. And it was my second marriage. Yeah. It was, I know this is really messed up and I'm going to do it anyway. So I think both of us felt like, yeah, it's really interesting because I think both of us felt like there are things really messed up in this relationship. I don't know if he followed through because his parents initially really, really liked me and I looked like the little girl that they could mold and shape into who they wanted. And I probably went through with it because it was like, I don't know, like somehow this person seems strong and I need that kind of strength.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Wow. Okay. That's, yeah. And let's also talk about your second marriage because this happened to you twice. Yeah. And there are many ways to fall into situations and relationships like this. And a lot of times after you've had one really toxic, unhealthy relationship, it predisposes you to have more. So we often fall into that trap multiple times before we're able to get ourselves out of it. Yeah. So with your second husband, it was,
well, okay. So all of this is really intertwined with my faith culture, what I believed, and marriage, super important, super heavy in its implications. So having gone through a divorce we actually parted after like 17 years, 18 years, and then completed divorce after 20 years. But anyway, 20 years. And then the second marriage. So I was so sure that I was much more clear on like hearing God's voice to me. And that must mean, because there wasn't an attraction right away, I just wanted a good man in my life and had that discussion with God. We could go all sorts of places with this, but the point is that once he came into my life at a time when I was praying for that, I recreated him, I think, in the relationship into what I thought that it was supposed to look like. And so, I fell head over heels in love with him then, just completely. But again, a story of betraying myself in thinking that this strong person could be my God in essence. So it was a similar, thing, just at a different stage in my emotional evolution. And because the second one came in what I felt like was me asking God, like, bring a good person into my life that, whatever I thought it was supposed to be, it was still this somebody who can run my life, kind of like can tell me, can be, can save me somehow.
Yeah.
And, neither of them clinically diagnosed in the, so the first one probably a narcissist, the second one borderline personality disorder.
Yeah.
And somehow I was drawn to whatever appeared to be the strength that I thought I was lacking and thinking I really needed. And both journeys, which were both about 20-year journeys, were, about finding myself. Anyway.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So I guess, with my dad, it was, it was never great. So there was not really, was there any kind of time that you were like, okay, this is really wrong, or this is abuse, or this is like, this is unacceptable. Like, when did it really hit you that, like, oh no, like, yeah.
On my wedding night.
Oh no. Oh.
And on our honeymoon.
Oh man.
And so, in my culture, being married, my faith culture, we made this choice. We're married, and we're married in the temple. The idea is that you're going to be together forever. And it was like, what did I do? What did I do? Okay, this is like, he didn't want to be with me, and he didn't like me. He didn't like my body. Did it feel like abuse? It felt, in my deepest sense of myself, it totally felt like rejection and abuse, but I wasn't what I probably thought I deserved it. Like, I made this choice anyway, and I could have done better and should have done better. And now I did. Now you just have to live with it. You made your bed, now sleep in it. Like, this is your life now.
Yep. Yeah. Dang.
And I guess you normalize, certain things. Like, what I'd seen in my older sisters, and I'm the youngest, my older sisters, and maybe even in my brother's marriage to some degree, although I don't know, I guess I saw in their marriages and parenting, from my perspective, this is really hard. And you do, like, it is all about self-denial and self-sacrifice. And not that they intended to model anything like that, but that is certainly what I saw. And so I'm like, okay, just give away all your dreams, hopes, aspirations. This is what it is.
Yeah. Make your whole life about this person.
Yeah. And kind of self-sacrifice. This is what it means to grow up. It's going to be really hard. And it's not going to be fun. Yeah, you're not going to like any of this. You're not going to like any of this.
Yeah. Wow. So how long did it take you to first, like, verbalize to someone else, like, I don't think the things happening in my relationship are okay?
By the time we had you, and we probably had, so we lived in Alaska, so we'd probably been married maybe 4 years, maybe 5. And I remember saying to my friend, if I had it to do over again, I would choose differently. And just hearing myself say that and seeing her reaction, because she said something like, well, we don't always choose who we fall in love with. And I thought, maybe that's, like, in love with wasn't really why I married. And it was kind of like, it must be obvious to everyone else how stupid I was to get in this relationship. And I was just telling her, like, oh, if I had it to do over again, I would choose differently.
Yeah. So, okay. So a few years into it, you were able to kind of,
like
okay,
5 to 8 years into it.
So then if we kind of move on to that, so a lot of times what happens in abusive relationships and abusive relationships with children is one spouse is abusing the other, and then the other can pass that on to the children because they don't know what to do with all of that hurt and that pain and the anger.
Yeah.
So that abuse kind of gets passed from them to onto their children.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what ended up happening. I mean, largely, it there was enabling of his abuse, because also you're supposed to support your husband, like in your family and your faith culture. That's an important thing, and you're not supposed to.
In my family culture, it was really important. Like, anger wasn't acceptable. It just wasn't something that we did well. It was like,
and so none of you knew how to deal with it either.
No.
So when he would get angry, that just causes you to shut down.
My
because
parents
you had no idea how to deal with that.
My parents had never modeled. What they had modeled was, and they great stuff. They loved us. They cared for us. They nurtured us. But they never did model conflict resolution. It was definitely conflict avoidance. And it was my mother usually going, okay, I take a deep breath. I go into another room. I think about all the things I really love about my husband. And then I'm ready to, but it wasn't, I never saw them work things out. They just always seemed to be on the same page. So yeah, I went into a relationship really ill prepared for, and the idea that you should never argue in front of your children was solid for me. Like, so if your dad said something, I felt like the best thing I could do for my children was to go along with it. Like, now I see that as so messed up, but like, heaven forbid that I should counter that in front of my children. That would rock the foundation of their world. It's a messed up way of looking, But the reality is I didn't even address it privately so much. It was too terrifying for me. Conflict was way too terrifying for me. So I internalized all of it, and I became abusive to my children.
Yeah. So tell us, like, what did you notice in yourself? Like, when did you first notice, like, oh no, like this horrible thing just came out of my mouth, and
or my hands or whatever that, this is hard to talk about. It's still a place that's just really, really hard to love myself and forgive myself. But that's the best thing I can do for my children is to love myself. Not, back to the best thing. But again, relieving the pressure, like, I'm still a growing human being and I'm not going to do it right. But this is what I want to do, like, is love myself and forgive myself. So so I bring home this beautiful baby, and I am so swept up in this sense. Like, I go, this is what love is. And I'm looking at the man who helped me bring, and I'm like, no, if I had to choose, like, and I do remember thinking that, like, if there was something that was going to happen to her, I would throw myself in front of a train. But if it were him and I had to choose between the two, I would definitely choose her. Like, this is what love is. And I was so in love with this beautiful baby, and she didn't sleep. So Deanna had colic. That might've been your way of internalizing manifesting the stress that existed, the undercurrents of stress that existed in our lives. And wow, probably one of the first things I did was let you cry. That was abusive. A newborn, to just put her in her bassinet and walk away, shut the door, dark room, and be in the next room in that little apartment and just let you cry and go. And it felt so wrong, and I did it anyway. And my husband, your dad, and I don't know, it's just that, like, the mother-in-law, like, this is what you do, or we're not going to let her run our lives. And I'm not saying, putting it all on him. I let it happen. I let my little newborn just cry herself to sleep. And that was probably the first thing that I remember doing that I felt like it isn't right, but it's expected. This is the way things are.
Yeah. That social expectation of whatever is normal for you to just continue doing that. Like that's, even if it feels wrong, that's a super powerful influence over us humans as communal animals. It's incredibly powerful to go along with what you're being told to do.
And I remember again when you were new, it's like true confessions, but just how like I had turned over my autonomy to this person, my husband, in many ways. Like we wanted to look at things were so important, like let's go buy a new this or that. And we left you in the car in a furry little suit. You're a newborn, mind you. You're in your car seat and we leave you in the car and I looked at the baby like, I don't think we should do this, but he's doing it. And we left you in the car while we went in to look at something. And you cry. And when we came back, and it's not like we were gone for hours, but you don't leave a baby in a car. Mm. And when we came back, you were crying and you were so red and in that hot little suit. Yeah, there were those kind of like, and I knew, like I said, it was something I knew I shouldn't do. Like I knew I needed to take care of you. And yet I still allowed the idea of, well, what will please my man or, this other person that I have put into this position. But again, I can't fault him. It's me that made those choices. Anyway. There could be so many stories, and it began to be this sense of, shame and guilt. Mm-hmm. But as time went by, those feelings of shame and guilt and more pregnancies, less sleep, more tension in the marriage, you kind of began to fill this role of where I had, terribly so, but like an outlet to like, just behave, that I vented what I couldn't say to Greg. Oops. I would say to you, or let out, vent anger and feel like, my children requires so much from me, in this sense of being victimized by my children. That just wasn't true, but it felt true.
Yeah. Let's talk more about that, because I mean, if you were doing things that felt wrong in the beginning, mm-hmm. but then you continued to do things like that.
Right.
What is that pitfall? Because I'm sure other parents fall into that where they know that the way they're treating their children isn't okay, mm-hmm. but they can't seem to stop themselves, right. Or they continue the behavior, and sometimes become defensive of the behavior. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about how do you slide into that place where you continue to do something that you did at least at one point feel was so wrong.
Mm-hmm. So, in thinking about this, like the way I see it now, I'm beginning to see this, the problem was so deep inside of me, mm-hmm. and it wasn't parenting, it wasn't the marriage, the problem lived in me. And like any addiction, like any bad behavior, we might say, I'm never going to do that again, which I always did. Mm-hmm. Never going to treat Deanna that way again. I'm never going to do that again. I will just will myself never to do that again. And while that might last for a minute, mm-hmm. Ultimately it's this self-hate. And so it's not going to sustain a change. It's going to continue to rob me of everything I need to change, which is self-love in a really healthy way. And I was not capable of that. I hated myself more and more, and became, less and less able to change. And I was just writing about it in the wee hours of the morning when you were 13. So, You lived 13 years of your life with this cycle of mine. And it wasn't like I wasn't abusive to your siblings, but I was most abusive to you.
Well, I ended up as the scapegoat.
Yeah, exactly.
In the house, so
you did. You were, yeah. And on your 13th birthday, and, you know, I look at the situation. We were living in my in-laws' basement. You know, we were living, I don't remember for sure when your dad had his meltdown, you know, kind of basically a breakdown. I had been having one for years in smaller doses. So it didn't manifest itself like a full-blown mental breakdown. And sometimes that's what's needed to do the job it needs to do. Like, get totally broken so you can get rebuilt better. But I think I was, you know, and so I don't remember what all was going on, but very likely your dad was out of work, living in the in-laws' basement, which was really stressful. At one point, trying to do homeschool with Emily and Josh, just a lot of things going on. Not that there's any, I'm just trying to see the lay of the land a little bit better. That brought me to a breaking point. So we had gone out to eat, and I don't remember if it was even on the way there, but I just totally, and you had a friend with you and your other siblings. I don't even think your dad was there.
I don't think so.
But I totally let loose and just harangued you verbally in front of everybody in this horrible way that I would do. And it was like an out-of-body experience. And that's not the first time it had happened. But it was like I was watching myself and I couldn't stop myself. I was saying horrible things to you and watching you. And it was on your birthday and watching your reaction and what that did to you. And I couldn't stop myself. And later that day, I don't even remember at what point, just being on the floor in the basement, breaking down. Like all the times I'd tried to change, and I'd been in therapy for the marriage or for different things, and just all the times I had tried to get that under control, finally admitting I have no control over this. I mean, it literally is like what you do in a 12-step program, where I just surrendered and said, I have no control over this. So yeah, my story very much has to do with, at the point that I stopped saying, you've got to pull it together, Rosemary, you've got to do better, God expects more from you, when I totally just flat was like, I am powerless against this. Help me. Like, I cannot stop this. And it took 13 years for me to get to that point in that super stressful situation. So hallelujah that it finally happened. Like all the things that needed to happen to break me in a good way. Because from that point on, my relationship with you got better. Like it never, now, and I'm not saying that, because sometimes that kind of surrender kind of brings like a total remodeling, like, and you don't even know that it's going to come. Like, but I knew that I was like, I'm helpless against this. And unless I have some kind of power higher than myself to change this, I'm not. And I can't do this to Deanna anymore. Like, and it's going to happen. Like, I can't stop myself.
Yeah. Wow. That's, I mean, and that would be horrible. Like, that would be a horrible place to be, a horrible position to be in, to
see yourself doing something that you can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's a horrible thing that I apparently was addicted to abusing you in particular, but you weren't the only one, but definitely you got the lion's share of that. And whatever chemicals that created in my brain, I mean, there was just some sort of addiction that I couldn't. And like I told you the one time back in Alaska, when I was breaking plates while I was talking very calmly to your dad, like that's also a super telling story. Like you were I don't know. I think Emily was like, it was before Trevor was born. So Emily was probably really little.
Yeah.
2.
I remember this. Yeah.
And you would have been, and Josh like 4 or whatever, and you maybe 6. Well, we moved from the place where it happened when you were, by the time you went into first grade. So you were somewhere around 5-ish, you know, and I'm taking plates off the kitchen table and crashing them on the floor with like, and talking very calmly.
So calmly on the phone.
To your dad.
Yeah, everything's great here. Slam.
And sorry, I have to go now. We have a little bit of a situation. Children are crying by this time, screaming because they're watching mother break plates on the kitchen floor, like just crashing. And there was a sense of satisfaction about that. And then I'm sure when I hung up, then it was to turn to the children and just scream at them. Like, and when I didn't want to tell anybody that I had behaved like that.
Yeah.
My children had witnessed it. For heaven's sakes, I didn't want my husband to know I was behaving that way. He was in Boston and telling me about the Monet exhibit, and I was furious that I was home with the children being victimized in this life that I didn't want, that I felt like, and all the shame associated with that, because I did love my children. I did, I just didn't know how to love maturely, and I didn't know how to love myself. So it was, to really love. But when I did confide in a friend within, I don't know, a few days or whatever, she said wisely, "It sounds like you're really mad at your husband. Like that's what the plate breaking was about." And I'd said, "No, it was my children. They're just out of control. And they're just so, just totally misplaced." And I really was angry at Greg. And I was angry at God. But for heaven's sakes, I wouldn't have, I don't know, I guess I was angry at myself for being such a colossal disappointment in every role, and that I couldn't measure up.
Yeah. And that is weirdly addicting.
Yeah.
Shame is addicting in your brain. It produces addictive chemicals that just keep you going back to things that why you repeat patterns of continue behaviors of things you don't really want to do, but you keep doing it. It is literally like an addiction. And also like victimhood can be really addicting because it's puts all of the blame on everyone else. And that's a lot easier to feel than to truly feel the harm and the pain and the damage that you have caused other people. And I think some people get stuck in that place and they don't move past it. Like you have developed, you worked on it and you developed this different relationship with shame, and you're coming out of it and you're not letting it dictate your behavior anymore. You're not letting it run your life for you. But I think people like my dad, I think he's stuck in it so deeply and has done so much damage that if he really, because he has acknowledged some of it, he has owned some of it, but I think if he really, really acknowledged the damage that he had done to his children, he might not survive it. And I think that some people get there where the shame, the pain of what you've done is so intense that you cannot get very close to it to touch it. And some people will never be able to get where you have gotten to. They just can't get close enough to that place because it would literally destroy their entire image of who they are, their entire sense of self, that they have done these really horrible things that really cause damage to people. And so it's, that's, how did you get out of that feeling? Because I'm sure you're not the only parent who felt victimized by your children.
Right. And there's a couple of things that come to my mind in what you're saying. Our psyche or whatever can be so fragile. Like we can't, if self-love, and just doesn't, anyway, okay, so I'll address your question and then, so how did I get to
how did you not end up like seeing what you were doing, and instead of like running from it, like pushing it away, denying that it was you, or putting it in this little space, or and like, because people in that place, when you're so consumed with so much shame, you end up getting really defensive. And yeah, it's so painful for you that you push it further away from you. You push it out of you as if you hadn't even done it. And so for you to turn towards it and actually say, okay, let me really take a look at myself instead of pushing it further away.
Okay, so I might be coming from a slightly different space.
Okay.
So in my family, it was all about internal, and I'm responsible to make other people happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to take care of everyone. So I don't know, unless I'm just blind to how I disassociated from it.
But no, like, yeah, you maybe didn't. Like, that's what, yeah. So
I think I was super internalizing it all the time, like all the time, but in a way that, that was super toxic and like so hard to bear. So I probably numbed myself in my church callings. I probably tried to compensate for how I wasn't fulfilling this role as mother in this beautiful way that I wanted it to be and thought it was supposed to be. You know, I really poured myself into the responsibilities I had at church. And I would get a lot of accolades for that and feel really good and be like, okay, maybe there's a counterbalance, like I'm still worthwhile. How did I pull out of it? I don't know. Because I wanted to mention something too. This is what I wanted to say for one thing. What Deanna and her siblings received was not only verbal abuse. I just want to unveil this. It was also physical abuse at my hands. Because for me, when I would hear about abusive parents, or I would listen to their story or watch, I'd always go, I wish my abuse was only at that level. Like, yeah, they're going to get over it and they're going to be okay and they can be forgiven, but not me. Mine is worse. Like my mom would go, oh, well, I did this or I did that. And I would go like, that's nothing. That's nothing compared to what I did. So there was this sense of always, thinking mine was, everything I had done was so horrible. And it was, I would, this rage that would happen in me, that where that came from, and I'm sure it was just this ultra frustration. So how was I able to navigate, get out of that?
I guess like, like how did you, I guess just get to a place where, you realize you're being abusive, you don't want to do it anymore. And because it was, so for you, it was that kind of breaking point where you feel like you kind of hit rock bottom.
Yes.
And then you were kind of able to maybe like take us through the steps of how you, after hitting rock bottom, where did you go from there?
Okay. I kind of want to say too, that before that, I mean, there were times that it felt like I hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
And that being able to talk to other mothers and realize, okay, it's normal to feel really sleep deprived. I mean, normal. It's normal to like your nerves to be raw. And so starting to be more honest in my close associations with like, oh my gosh, I did this. And the other person go, oh, I've done something like that too. I mean, really helped to not keep it all hidden. Although there was always a part of me saying, yeah, but mine's worse. Like, thank you for sharing what you just shared, and I'll share this much with you, but mine is worse. You know, it's like internalizing that. So instead of being like defensive, oh, that's not me. Mine was, I'm sorry, I keep ruining the sound. I think. Sorry. Okay. I think mine was more the toxicity of constantly internalizing it on myself. Okay, so when I did reach rock bottom, then what? Well, I was looking at the circumstances in our life at that time, and like then I got divorced. I honestly think I kind of began to see that might have been a big part of my being able to look at that relationship and also like confront my in-laws when they were attacking me, and just kind of go into it and walk toward them and say, give it to me, you know? And just having like somehow that surrender did give me confidence to have a voice, maybe more than ever. There were other things that along the way, definitely, but that surrender probably plays a bigger role than like my world got broken. Yeah, we got divorced, you know, and I moved out. Those were big things that I kind of began to claim my true identity to some degree. And I don't know, as far as, you know, like my relationship with you, it just didn't happen again where like I knew that there would be this thing and it would just kind of click in like, and I see now it probably was some kind of chemical thing in my brain, like reacting to you in a certain way. And it just didn't happen. Like it just didn't happen anymore. I remember when we moved to our other house, and one time it started to like over something that was so dumb. And I went, oh, no, just, we're not like, and it stopped. So I know my relationship with you got so much better because there were big things to resolve inside myself. There were still other ways that the abuse maybe looked more like neglect with your siblings. Like I just was checked out.
So that you brought up a good point. If you're in an abusive relationship, get out of it. Don't stay. If you're staying for the kids as a child in an abusive home, please don't stay for the kids. Me being physically separated from that man was the best thing to happen to me in my childhood. That man I would have been better off not having a father in my life at all than having this man. He was so damaging to me. So if you have an abusive partner and you're staying together for the kids, you are not helping the kids. Please don't do that. And you're not helping yourself either. And because when you are with an abuser, it does end up rubbing off on you. And especially if you have children, it's really easy to make them the targets of all of this misplaced, miscommunication and distrust and all of these hurt, resentful feelings that you don't know what to do with, that need to go to the abuser. But that person is a terrifying person usually. And so directing that towards the abuser is really hard. So you direct it towards the next closest thing. And that's a really easy, really slippery slope. So I wanted to say that. And what else did I want to say? So other people in your position who know that they're doing something wrong, but can't seem to stop themselves. I agree that like hitting rock bottom is sometimes the best thing that can happen to you in life. And really let yourself hit rock bottom sometimes and really let it break apart your worldview, break you apart a bit because that will give you a more perspective. Like you're kind of able, I've been there before, and I've like, you kind of are able to, it's like coming out of a fog a little bit where you're like, oh, like, wow, this,
right.
I was so wrapped up in this and I couldn't control this and I couldn't really get a hand. And now I'm seeing this from a totally different kind of perspective, and it becomes kind of more manageable. And it turns into like an empowering place, strangely enough, where it is kind of like, where you're kind of like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be this anymore. I don't want this anymore. And you're actually able to like really enact some big changes sometimes when you get to that point. So that's a really good, because it is terrifying. It's a terrifying thought. You see yourself slipping towards rock bottom and you're doing everything you can to stop yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that is to your own detriment. Sometimes hitting rock bottom really is the best thing that can happen to you.
Yeah. We're so afraid of our world coming apart. And yet that's often what really needs to happen, is for it to come apart.
Mm-hmm.
Marianne Williamson saying she went through a mental breakdown, and, you know, and like her way of describing it was God saying, well, we're just going to like knock all of this down because you really need to be rebuilt in a whole different way.
Yeah.
And so why do a little patch up repair here and a little patch up repair there? We just really need to take this all down. Now, for me, it has been, you know, a slower process, but it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And letting the story be rewritten. And I guess part of me, you know, I want to, when I see people that I think that I perceive maybe are like I was and am growing out of, and I think what would be the key thing to offer to them. And I almost feel like I just want to put my arms around them and say, love, just know there's nothing, like you're going to be okay. Just love yourself.
Yeah.
Like, just accept that you are love. But I don't know that I could have, if somebody had said that to me, although they did in various ways, and it did have an impact. But you receive what you're ready to receive. But just the times that I felt love from someone when I was going through those things, it was like amazing. Like, I couldn't even hold it because I was so full of self-loathing, but I know I hungered for it. Mm. And did it change me? Yes. Like, that's something I loved, to go to the temple and do a specific thing in the temple where it was one-on-one, because I felt so loved and so seen. And that helped me. I did that every week. And I see that as part of, like, and of course I did do therapy. And but I see that thing that I did, and my motivation in a way was kind of, I'll feel better about myself if I'm doing something for God. So I'll go to the temple. But what did happen, I mean, that's not, I mean, God will come to us wherever we are, you know, like, and work with whatever motivation. I've got to be better. I've got to be better. Well, you know, that can be so, like, beating yourself up all the time or whatever. But for me, it did give me a space where, I just felt a whole lot of love. Mm. And then to just be like, I'm the part that received that. And then I go back home, and I didn't always want to go back home. I'm like, I just want to stay here. Mm-hmm. I feel love here. But it did increase space for me. So whatever that a person can do that somehow opens that space of love, and what I can do for other people or extend to other people. And that's what I want to work on, is ways of radiating that love, you know, claiming it is mine, it is who I am, to claim that, and then to radiate it, you know, and not like, don't treat your kids like that. Don't yell at them. Oh, you'll be so sorry that you did that, you know, but to, unless that works, you know, but just somehow, I think that the heart of the problem, for me, was just a little girl who didn't feel that sense of love that I needed to feel about myself. And I did grow up in a very loving home, but somehow missed that that I was okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's helpful at all, but I do think it's so much about love. And just when I guess when I hit rock bottom, and yes, doing some therapy and just the growth through the years, there was a sense of just handling myself with more gentleness.
Yeah.
And then it was there to give more and more to my children.
Yeah.
I mean, I did also have a kind of life-changing thing in Alaska when we lived there, when like for 3 days, like stress was just lifted from me. And again, it was a miracle, just leaving room for something that is beyond like what made sense to my mind. And somehow it happened, like the stress was just lifted from me. It wasn't just 3 days, it was actually 3 months when we lived at Owen Circle. And I began to see things so differently. Like, it's not the circumstances. It was the perspective and the story that I believed of life with children is so hard. Life with a husband, like everything is so hard. And it began to, it looked so different to me. Like where I could take joy, I didn't have to feel like I was deprived.
Yeah.
Like I could take joy in just simple things that the children were doing, or not feel like time was driving me. I could just be this slowing down and breathing and being checked into the moment. And man, that was revelatory to me.
Mm-hmm.
And although I couldn't, like after those 3 months, it's not like I wanted to live in that space, but I didn't. And yet it gave me reference, and I was changed. You know, it gave me this reference. But I still, obviously, because that was before your 13th birthday. So there were still, I guess I carried that with me. And so I dealt with the abuse cycle with you differently. Maybe with more of a sense of being loved because of that experience I had been given. So that when, like in the house in Orem, when it was really I don't even know what was going on, and you were acting out on your siblings, and I slapped you. Do you remember this?
A little bit.
We were
now that we're talking about it.
A lot of things happen in basements. Like we were in the basement of that house. Never liked basements. And you acted out on your siblings, and I just said, "Deanna, stop it!" And I slapped you across the face. You were 10 years old. And I remember I went upstairs and I called my friend and I said, "Help me. Like I'm about ready to call a crisis center and they might take my children away from me. So please help me. Like I don't want to be in this place." And she came and got me. She had teenage daughters, the calls. They loved you guys. And she had one of the girls come over and be with you. And she brought me a cinnamon roll and we went for a drive and we just talked. That was huge. And thank goodness there are crisis lines available to people, but that's what I felt like. Like, I don't want to do this. I'm going to hurt somebody and it's going to be you. You know, I'm going to hurt her really bad. I already slapped her. So it was huge to have a friend that would do that for me.
Yeah.
So each of those, there were things that were hinge points that helped me. And it did involve other people hearing me or seeing and acknowledging, you know, you're okay.
Yeah.
You're going to be okay. Let's get you some help or whatever. She didn't exactly do that, but she just listened and was like, "I will always be here for you." You know, and I did. I mean, it just helped me. It gave me strength. And so that probably, you know, and then we moved from there into Grandma and Grandpa's basement.
Yeah.
You know, another level of stress. You know, so I grew in each of these experiences. But I do feel like maybe something I had going for me was the introspection, the self-introspection was extremely painful, but I mean, I did try to say at one point, it's my kids, they're driving me crazy. But I think I moved from that stance of being victimized because of experiences that I was having, like that helped me see I am not being victimized by them. You know, it is the circumstance. And I began to look more at my marriage. You know, it's the difficulty, like, oh, maybe this really is a really hard marriage, a particularly hard marriage, you know? And so there were levels and layers of, maybe for some people it can happen a lot faster. For me, it happened, in these layers. And then when I did reach that rock bottom stage, I think it was just, I like, maybe it was knowing that I had access to help, like from God, divine help. I mean, I had humans that could help me that were very important, but I'll just say that plainly, like, it was no longer like, I'm so ashamed, God, I'm so ashamed, and I have to hide this from you, and I promise I'll do better, I promise I'll do better. It was, here it is, it's ugly, it's horrible, and here it is, like, I'm not going to hide it from you anymore. Help me. I can't keep wounding her this way. And it was a whole different stance. Like, it was no longer a hiding. And I know you expect me to be better. I'm so ashamed. I'm so ashamed. I'm so ashamed. It was like ripping it open and just going, it's so ugly. And here it is. Help me. I don't know if that didn't answer your question exactly. Where did it go from there? I just know that my relationship with you, and I got divorced. We moved into that house, you know, and you and I were like friends. Like, there was a beautiful friendship. I feel like I still wasn't there for you, kind of, because I began to, the form it took next was more of a negligence. I began to like, oh, I'm divorced and I'm going to date and I'm going to go back to college. And the pendulum swung a little bit far that way. But for me, it was, part of reclaiming who I was, you know, and that I mattered. Yeah. But there was a lot of neglect going on where I wasn't there for you kids, you know, and you did grow up, very much assume an adult role and a caretaker role. So was I abusive in the way that I was before? No, which was better. I still, there was, trying to come to terms with just being kind of checked out from the lives of my children. Like, Josh would come home and he'd be locked out of the house and he never had a key, and he'd just have to wait for me to come home to get him into the house. I mean, there were just things that I wasn't, a whole lot of growing up that I was still trying to go through. Yeah. And that my kids survived that and still love me. That's just, if that's not the grace of God and of my children, I don't know what is.
That also, like, this didn't happen by accident. Like, we don't have a good relationship accidentally or incidentally. Like, we worked at this. Like, you worked for a long time before I was really open, because after this kind of negligent period, then you got remarried and you moved hours away and disappeared from our lives. And so that would, and which was, then an abandonment wound, on top of it. And then, and then really pushing you and Dad both away for my own, like, kind of, I couldn't have you that close to me. And then you spent probably 10 years of, like, really trying, like, apologizing. Like, she spent a long time. There was like a point I remember where it, like, things really started to kind of hit you where you were like, holy crap, like, I really did do some things to my children that I shouldn't have done, and I feel really bad about these things. And really, when you were coming to terms with it, there was so much reaching out and apologizing and just saying, like, I remember I did this horrible thing to you and you didn't deserve it and I'm sorry. And a lot of apologizing and apologizing for specific things, and a lot of showing up differently, showing up better, showing up as a better version of yourself, so willing to show support, so willing to show up, so willing to do anything. And it's still, you kept that up for years before I was really able to like open my heart back up to you. And that was what did it, is that eventually it hit me at one point, like, she's been doing this a long time. Like, this is, and I've been keeping her at arm's length still. Like, and it really hit me, like, the amount of work that you put into, and then compared to Dad, where he did pretty much zero work to try to remedy or fix or heal anything. And then I did have to like make a choice at one point, like, okay, like, I want to choose to forgive her. I want to choose to move on. I want to choose to have whatever kind of relationship we can have, and try to make it the best that we can. You know, and I think all of my siblings have done the same, where it's, you know, and you do on your part, like, you have to decide.
Yeah.
And, you know, had you not done that work, like, we wouldn't have this relationship. Like, you would still be at arm's length. Like, we wouldn't have friends, like, or we wouldn't be friends. Like, it took you really taking accountability, like, really, really hardcore taking accountability, never justifying what you did, never defending it, just owning that it was bad and it never should have happened, and that you were in the wrong, that it was not our fault. And like that, that's what opened that door, was hearing that kind of accountability. And then the continued effort of, let me show up in your life differently. Let me, you know, like, if you will have me, like, I will show up with support in whatever way I can. I will be there for you. I will, you know, do what I can. And then really doing it and really following through with it without getting that much from us in return for a while.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, to me, just hearing you talk and hearing your perspective, it is an absolutely amazing journey. And I hope for people listening, for, you know, at wherever you know you are in your story, you know, that this is redemptive. Like, it didn't happen overnight, and it's continuing. Like, it's continuing. And the idea of never too late, I believe that. You know, never too late. Now, what was also a hard journey for me was not getting stuck, you know, in the places of taking accountability. Because with my temperament of toxic perfectionism or religious scrupulosity, which I'm not sure where I fit exactly, but I know those are factors for me, that the problem of getting stuck in remorse and regret is huge. And so we're not talking, I mean, that was part of the journey. And I began to realize I would get stuck in those places, and that I had habitually done that through my life, you know, like, oh, I so regret these years. And then I'd be living in this space where I wasn't checked in, so that when that space passed, I'd look back and go, oh, I so regret that I didn't live better when I, you know, and just constantly being in that space. So, so it was the journey of trying to claim, like, again, a journey of self-love, the love that, you know, I could view it as, you know, like trying to feel like learning that I didn't have to earn love from God, that I am loved and I am love. And it's still a journey, but all of that along with this, where yes, it was useful to call and say, I remember that I did this and I'm so sorry. But sometimes it wasn't helpful in the sense that, like, if I wanted to just bawl and be, and again, that's an addictive thing that happens.
You're still
that
feeling
I began
that shame,
to get,
and that still can be
the shame,
addicting.
Right, the difference between doing that in a space of shame and doing it in a space of love is, and I, you know, I'm still learning the difference, you know, but I began to discern the difference. Like, if the motivation, like, where am I? Like, can I say this thing? Can I acknowledge this thing in a way that is motivated by my love and seeing that person who happens to be my child as big enough and whole enough that they can, of course, forgive me or receive my offering, you know, and not hate me for the rest of their lives. That they're big enough and whole enough that they can receive it, and I don't have to keep going, I ruined everything.
Yeah.
I'm so powerful that I ruined your life. I'm so powerful that I ruined your whole eternity because I was such a terrible parent. And you were huge, helping me kind of recognize, you know, and you continue to help me recognize, well, does that, you know, that's really this weird, twisted superiority or whatever. And it's still damaging. So yeah, the journey to get to that space of, and this sounds so complicated, but I think really what it is was just kind of surrendering, like, I'm not all powerful, all knowing, but I can trust in that God is, and that it's all about love.
Yeah.
And and trust that my children, that me coming to them, like the idea that, oh, what if I brought that up, and that would just be horrible. And there are some things that are probably better left not being brought up because they can trigger, you know, and you hear that in 12-step programs, at least in 12-step programs that I attended, you know, if it's something, you know, when you're trying to put right the wrongs or acknowledge and take accountability, there are some things that are better not to bring up because then it triggers that space again. And sometimes that just needs to be resolved, you know, in writing it out or writing a letter that you're never going to send. But I believe that person at their best self that's able to not be wounded by it can receive, you know. But yes, I did do that work, you know, and I continue to do that work. So yeah, that feels really good. Like, and if I can do it, that's what a human can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? You can, and it isn't too late. And hiding it is never going to make it get better. Like, well, that happened years ago. Why should we talk about that? It's woven into the fabric. And as long as it keeps being hidden, is it Brene Brown that says those things will just grow mold? And like, but revealing it first in myself and to God, that's been my journey. Like, not hiding it from God and going, ooh, you know that I did these things. It's like, yes, and I love you, and we're going to use that to just like metabolize it into something beautiful, because that's what love can do. What a pure love can do. Can metabolize ugly things into something beautiful.
Absolutely.
And don't deny that they were ugly. Just let them be exposed to the light of love.
That is, I think that's, the more we're talking, the more it's hitting me that, like, how important love is in this journey. Not only like being abused, but like being an abuser, like that part of it. I mean, when you hate yourself so much, you can't forgive yourself. And if you can't forgive yourself, how can you behave differently? And if you can't behave differently, then things are never going to get better.
That's the meaning of damned.
So there is a point
that's the hell we create.
as an abuser, or like any of us, we've all hurt other people. We've all, you know, regret things that we've done, and something that you do have to do is show yourself some love and some forgiveness and some empathy, because a lot of times abuse comes from abuse. Hurt people, and it can be a really, really hard cycle to get out of. I mean, a lot of people never even recognize that they're in it. So trying to find love in whatever way you can, because even, I mean, I'm sure at that point, like, I know when I've hurt people, that's when I find it hard to love myself, when I've hurt someone else. But that's what you have to find some kind of, even scraps, just some kind of little bit of enough self-love to say like, okay, like I did this thing and it was horrible and I don't want to do this anymore. And I love myself enough to want to change, to put in the effort to work on myself and to work on this relationship, and to heal the harm that I've caused. Because when you have done harm like this, you doing the harm, you are also the most equipped to help heal that harm, which you absolutely can do. Like the harm that you did to me growing up is healed, is largely healed. Like I don't, there's damage that dad did to me that does still affect me because his was more intense. But also because he can't really take accountability. I can't have a conversation like this with him. He has never put in the effort. He has never put in any effort to try to remedy our relationship. So yeah,
that's powerful.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, one thing that I wanted to say, just because I'm thinking when you're talking about scraps, to take what you can to try to build a sense of love, to open space for it somehow. Because I used to look in the mirror and there was no way I could feel love for that person.
Yeah.
Like it just wasn't, it was outside of the possibility.
Yeah.
Something that helped me, just like, I can't not mention this. I think it was when I was pregnant with Emily, so my third child, I started keeping a gratitude journal at the end of each day, like a very simple, and this is really awful to, like to even laugh at this, but if it was like, I didn't hurt anybody today. I didn't, like slap somebody or scream in somebody's face, throw somebody across the room, because I had done those things. Even if it was that simple, it was like written evidence to my brain that I'm not all bad, or that my life isn't all bad.
Yeah.
And the letters I wrote to my grandmothers when we lived in Alaska were actually really huge too. So sometimes, because I wanted to share with them, I describe it as skimming off the cream in our lives, and I didn't know there was cream. I wanted to do this thing for my grandmothers that would bring them delight or let them know I loved them. And I didn't know it was such a helpful thing for me because suddenly when I was watching my children and watching our lives, I was taking on a different perspective of, oh, that's so cute. I can include that in my letter to grandma. Oh, I love that just little things that changed thought patterns of how victimized or how horrible my life was. Yeah, those were things that I look back kept me afloat.
Yeah.
I wrote letters to each of them different, but weekly, to Grandma Waller, to Grandma Montgomery, and they were different letters. And it was delightful. It was something, and I love to write anyway, but just, it was a way of teaching my brain to look for something good in a life that seemed to be crushing me, and that I was not crushing it, but failing it, So yeah, those were some scraps that helped keep me afloat.
Okay.
And when I look at it now, like they began to have some weight instead of just all the negativity that I would see about myself and my mothering. Like, I do this thing, and I can see some good, like, yeah. If I just wanted to offer maybe some specific things, and for other people it might be something different, but that can help retrain your mind so that it's not always about self-loathing.
Yeah.
And yeah, there were definitely other skills, in going to counseling and just learning to counter those thoughts that would come, like, I'm so horrible at this. Is that really true? Like, I am such a worthless person. Is that really true? Just learning to combat some of those thoughts. All of that was part of the journey.
Yeah. It's a whole retraining of your brain.
Yeah, a retraining of your brain, and just being willing to accept a different story than I was supposed to be perfect and I'm not. Therefore, I am a wreck and everything is ruined.
Yeah, that idea of like, well, I ruined it, so why bother? Why bother trying? Like that's
actually some things that I read or became aware of, changing that mindset of like, what if mess is part of the story? And then going, oh, like that was huge for me to open up space for that. Like mess is part of the story. Like the cartoon with the frizz. She's like, let's take chances, take risks, get messy, just the possibility that, and then I could relinquish some of that death grip on, I'm supposed to be so perfect. No. Yeah.
And this almost like penance that you feel like you have to pay by hating yourself.
Right.
That you have to hate yourself because you've done these horrible things.
Yes.
Which seems to make sense. But it doesn't actually, but it actually makes everything harder, makes you a worse person.
Yeah, it's counter to helping us.
Yeah, it makes the situation so much worse. Because the more you can feel loved and feel love and embody it, the more you show it to the people around you. And you have to include yourself in that. You have to love yourself in that in order to show love fully to others. That also needs to be something that's in you.
Very counterintuitive to my way of my family culture, my church culture. Not that it's like it is very much at the heart of what I see as the gospel of Jesus Christ, but I did not feel it, and like it's disguised in somehow in ways that we culturally interpret it in a beautiful family that I was raised in, and what I think of by and large a very beautiful religious community that still doesn't see that self-love, because that was reprehensible to me.
Yeah.
The idea of self-love was so reprehensible.
Yeah.
Like that is not a thing.
It's wrong.
That is so wrong. And how my mind has had to be broken to like let in some of the light of like what real self-love is, and how foundational that is to living a healthy Christian life.
That's in the commandments, right? Love your neighbor as you love yourself.
And we kind of go, well, that just means do good, be good, but it's not thinking about yourself or taking care of yourself. It's taking care of everybody else. At least that's how I kind of interpreted that.
Yeah.
But it's different for me now, kind of like, like just trying to accept God really loves me. Like, I don't even have to do anything or be worthy. I take that word out and replace it with just like prepared. Like, be prepared because he's going to, like, there's all this love and there's all this great stuff. Be prepared. Like, have your arms open. It's there. It's yours. Just be prepared to receive it. Yeah. I was never unworthy. Just be prepared. Have your arms open and say, like, oh my gosh, I can't, I'm too dirty. I'm too inadequate. Like, no, you're just fine. This is just, you are loved and you are love.
Yeah. Wow. This is, I didn't know this was where the conversation was going to take us, but this is, that's powerful. And how wrong it feels, and how I'm sure like victims could be watching this, victims of abuse could be watching this. And it's hard to hear too, that even an abuser needs to love themselves. That's challenging. It can be hard to hear as an abuser and hard to hear as a victim, that is kind of counterintuitively the best way forward. I actually, I keep interjecting, but I actually couldn't receive like that choice to just love myself.
For me, it had to come through, I will let God love me. I will let God love me. And then opening up a little bit more, I will let God love me. You know, and the idea that he actually could really and truly, like, I didn't know that at a really deep level. You know, I grew up singing, I am a child of God, you know, the idea, I mean, intuitively we know it, but somehow it gets covered up. Like, I have to be better to actually receive it.
Yeah.
I have to earn it. Maybe I have to live where I'm good enough. Like, he's so good and I'm so far down here. Like, how can I even have a right to say, oh, you know, like, I'm worthy of his love.
Yeah.
You know? So for me, and to just make up my mind, well, I'm going to love myself. I couldn't seem to do that, but to somehow give space for, God really loves me. This is what you're telling me, God. So you really love me? You really love me? Like, that began to crack open the possibility. Then it must be all right for me to love myself.
Yeah.
Like, if you really love me, then it's okay to love me. Like, it had to come that way. Instead of going, I'm just going to make up my mind to love myself.
Yeah, you can't
myself.
just decide to love yourself. That's
I
not how that works. Yeah.
I couldn't do that. So I don't know. Just, that's kind of how
Yeah.
I had to.
To go around it, to get to that place.
And I bump up into it again and again, where it's like, oh, I'm back to that thing where I don't really love myself. Like, in this area, I've got to self-sacrifice. And when I think, like, you know, just the other day, bumping into that again, I'm like, oh, I thought I was doing this good thing, but really it's back to that idea. I'm supposed to self-sacrifice. That's saying, nope, I want you to rest and receive my love. Oh, okay. And that means, like, it's all right with loving myself. Yes, it is. Like, it's bumping into it and getting larger in my capacity to receive that love.
Yeah. And the bigger you get in your capacity to receive that love, the more love you are able to show us.
Organically, it just happens.
Yeah. The healthier our relationship gets.
Something that I have to so orchestrate or whatever. Does it take work? It takes an intentionality, but the intentionality is already turned in that direction, and it's happening more and more organically. I guess that's how it feels.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't have to recreate it all the time.
Yeah, or try to force it or try to control it. Yeah, it just happens more naturally. Yeah. I do know that, for our relationship, your relationship with my siblings, like, you loving yourself has, the more you have loved yourself, that has enriched our relationship and deepened it. And like, that's a part of the healing process, is learning I mean, on both ends, both of us have to learn to love ourselves. Like, the more you love yourself, the better all of your relationships get, essentially, because you were loving yourself, and the more empathy you have. And that was big for me in my forgiveness, was having empathy for both you and Dad, that both of you guys went through some stuff growing up, and really ingraining the idea that we're all doing the best we can, even when our best isn't very good. That everybody is doing the best they can, and that no one is perfect, and inevitably you will hurt people, and that I have hurt people unintentionally, and that, and really just deciding, like, okay, like, I'm deciding to forgive these people for myself and for my own benefit, because that's part of the person I want to be, and I don't want to carry this pain around with me anymore. Like, I don't want to carry it as close to the chest as I have been. And I would like to, try to repair some of the damage in my childhood. And that is, having a relationship with a mom now that, like, we didn't have growing up. We didn't have a good relationship. And so it's healing those past wounds by having that relationship now, because time doesn't work how we think it does. And so you can heal the past in the present.
That is a super redemptive true.
Yeah. That it very much so that, that like, that you have healed the damage that you have done. That is largely healed for me from you. And that, because dad hasn't done the work, I still carry more damage from that because he hasn't put in the effort. Kind of part of it is I don't think he loves himself. And
that's a huge part of
it. Yeah. And so by not loving yourself and living in this place of self-loathing because all these horrible things you've done just keeps you in that place. It doesn't get you out of it. Hating yourself for it it isn't the penance you think
and
it is.
Masking
it isn't
it with anything that looks like a capability or, never is enough. Like acquire more stuff, look better, get a better car, like it's never enough it's not the problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel that need to just, that we have to just love.
Yeah.
to love ourselves and allow ourselves to be loved.
Yeah.
Sounds so simple.
Oh, wow. I had a few little notes, but I think we kind of talked about everything. I don't know. Yeah, like what I wanted most out of this video was just to show people that you can heal these relationships. Like you can grow up in a pretty horrible environment and still heal from it and heal with that person who did the harm. And not just heal from that damage, but actually like go forward into like a new age, into a new kind of relationship that you never thought was possible. I never would have thought this was possible. If you told me when I was a kid that this is the kind of relationship we'd have now, I would have said, no way.
Yeah.
Absolutely no way.
Like there was certainly a time that I never would have imagined that we could, like, how did this happen? Like, just an amazing,
Yeah. That this can happen and that you can go from being an abuser to being a friend, that it is possible, and you can heal that damage. It is possible, and it's possible, and it helps by having conversations like this. We have spent a lot of time, a lot of years talking about a lot of this and getting the hurt out of us.
And that sometimes when you think you've arrived, there's another layer.
Yeah.
And just being willing to go, like our trip to Europe, I felt like we were pretty evolved in our relationship, but there were things that came up under those circumstances that were really hard, but neither one of us closed the door and went, okay, we've hit this wall and we can't get past these things. It was an opportunity to think about it and go, wow. There's still work to be done.
Work. Yeah.
And I suspect that, at different levels, but we're better at, it's more and more solid in just the love.
Yeah.
And so the grace that we're able to grant each other, like, okay, you said that and it hurt, like, let's talk through it, instead of like, oh my gosh, how am I going to fix this with Deanna? It's just abandon that whole idea. I'm going to surrender and go, oh, I'm curious. Tell me what's going on here. Like, what I obviously didn't understand, what this was and why it triggered you.
Yeah.
So help me understand, so we can.
Getting curious is so important. Yeah. Getting
so
curious, and really adopting the attitude of conflict is an opportunity for connection.
Yeah.
And that you can come out so much stronger from a conflict than you were before the conflict. It's a lot of counterintuitive stuff today. Yeah.
Yeah. And how it's not about fix. It's not about right or wrong. Curiosity is such a good way to look at it. Like, just things coming up that I was watching myself respond the other day when you overheard my conversation and you came in and said, hey, and I'm like, oh no, this wasn't supposed to happen. And go, remember, we don't think like that anymore. Like, this is exactly what needs to happen. This isn't an interruption. This isn't like, oh no, we're off course. It's nope, this is exactly right. Let's look at it just the way it is and be willing to go, okay, what is this? And what is your perspective on this.
Yeah.
I'm curious. And you helped me see something I could not see on my own. You know, if I had shut that down going, like, this is what I picture it's supposed to fit in this way. And I'm going to do this big magnanimous thing today. And you brought me back to reality that the timing might not be right and that would be okay. And it wasn't right for you and your siblings. And I needed to hear that. And I just, that I didn't have to be in this space of like, oh no, I've ruined everything. And this isn't the way it was supposed to look. And just kind of go, this is exactly how it's supposed to look. And it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, abandon that stance of it's supposed to look like this.
Yeah.
Christ-like is supposed to look like this. Parenthood is supposed to look like this. Motherhood is supposed to look like this. Relationship is supposed to look like this. And for me, like, just, this is just love. And the conflict, the everything, like, what can this offer?
Mm-hmm.
What does this have to offer in our relationship? Everything is just relationship and everything is love.
Yep.
Everything.
Yep. Ta-da.
Ta-da.
Yeah. Good talk. Yeah.
Thanks,
Is there anything else you want to talk about or bring up or say or?
I don't think so. Thank you.
I think we did really well.
You're amazing. I love you. Thank you for loving me.
All right.
Thank you for you.
Thank you for you. Thank you for you.